We will start out with John. I'm gonna pick on you to start out with a quick introduction of yourself, maybe a location, whereabouts, and what's keeping you busy these days.
Sure. I'm John Younger. I was for many years an HR executive. I left that role about 25 years ago. Formed two companies, one the Novations Group, the second the RBL Group. We were very fortunate. We took two companies public over a period of time, and around 2012, 2013, Jean, I had shifted from continuing to do full-time consulting. I'm an old guy. Full-time consulting is really tough when you're an old guy. And I see the smiles on the face that everybody kind of understands that at a deep level. And so I shifted. I had enough money to put a roof over our head and food on the table, and it became a chance to give back. I started to do that by writing about the freelance economy, or as I called it, the freelance revolution. I started to write that as a book for Harvard, then wrote it as a series of articles for the Harvard Business Review, and then Forbes said, "Would you be interested in writing for us?" I get $250 if I write 5 articles per month, and not $250 an article, $250 entirely for the 5 articles. I've been doing it for 3.5 years. I will not miss that $250, and as a result of that, and trying to tell the great stories around the world of the freelance revolution, I have had a delightful third career. So I am very excited to be part of this. I am very excited to be part of myBasePay. I think it is a terrific organization that's sponsoring some enormously important change and innovation. And it's a privilege to be part of this particular group, as well as any group that has Jahn and Cesar as part of it.
Well, John, I appreciate the endorsement and the plug and the transparency as part of the introduction. So thanks so much, John. Kevin, you might go next.
Thanks.
I know, tough to follow that, right?
Yeah, it's like cheers. No HBR review writings or anything like that. So hi, I'm Kevin Sturge. For many years, I ran the contingent labor workforce at Cisco Systems, which is about 50,000 contingent workers globally. So looked at ways that we could help improve the performance of that workforce in its entirety. More recently, I've been doing consulting for various companies, both in the contingent workforce space on the platforms, as well as helping some staffing companies get established and help sell to larger companies.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Kevin. Thanks for making time being with us.
No problem. I enjoy this, as you know, right? Based in California.
Great.
So no snow, okay?
That's right. Stay warm.
Yes.
Thank you, Kevin. Brian, can you go next, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. Really excited to be here. Brian Hoffmeyer. I work for Beeline. I do a number of different things for the organization, including having global responsibility for our absolutely business critical and strategic partner network, which includes a wide variety of different kinds of partners, ranging from services partners to large software organizations, talent startups, all of whom contribute value to the greater extended workforce that Beeline is the centralized system of record for. I've been with the company for 17 years, which is, I always think is ironic that I've worked for a company that manages temporary labor for 17 years. There's a lot of that goes around our space. It's one of the ironies of the space, based outside of Denver, Colorado. I love snow. As soon as this is over, I'm headed to the mountains to ski. I think this is just such an important discussion. I truly have a passion about the importance of managing the extended workforce well. And this is this topic of the marketplace economy. I love the way John called it, the freelance revolution. It is absolutely critical. Companies need these workers to get their product out the door, no matter what that product is. And so I think this should be really interesting and hopefully educational and fun discussion.
That's awesome. We're definitely excited for having you, Brian, and tap into that 17-year experience with Beeline. So thanks so much.
Thank
Last
you.
but not least, Cesar.
Oh, well, hard to follow up all of you guys, but Cesar Jimenez, CEO of myBasePay. Obviously super excited, based here in Miami, so we never get snow anywhere. It'll never happen here in Miami ever. But in any event, we are, myBasePay is an employer of record business. Our job is to make sure that contingent workers have a great journey amongst their experience during the assignments that they're on. So we're here to make sure that we're trying to elevate the employer record business by providing a lot of value that the contingent workers deserve and need.
That's great. Thank you, Cesar. Appreciate that. So Brian, I'll start the conversation with you around the marketplace economy in general. If you could share maybe a few examples of such marketplaces that are shaping the hiring process, especially in this highly competitive environment these days, maybe a little bit further types of marketplaces that are taking over the traditional methods, and how can really organizations benefit from utilizing services as such to attract the niche talent?
Yeah, it's such an important topic. So for me, this all starts with this idea, two ideas, I guess. One is that, as I alluded to earlier, the extended workforce, whatever you want to call it, that's the term we try to use, has become absolutely business critical. Again, companies of all types can't get things done without it. When I started in this business, the contingent workforce, the extended workforce, was kind of an afterthought. And one of the benefits of the pandemic, I think, has been, and I don't talk about benefits of the pandemic all that often, but has been that companies are no longer embarrassed about their non-employee workforces. They've realized they're important, they're critical, they've got to know what they're doing. Along with that growth in criticality, we've seen this shift from, it's not just a cost savings play. As the non-employee workforce has grown, HR has gotten more and more involved. Procurement is still involved and is important, but companies have really realized that in order to get the right talent, they need to balance cost, quality, and how long it takes to find that person, three sides of that triangle. And that's increasingly what we're hearing from our clients, that we're talking to our clients about. Cost is important, but if you save $5 and the person is really bad, you haven't really achieved anything, right? And so that is driving the use of what we kind of broadly call our alternative sources of talent, marketplaces of all types. We break those marketplaces generally down into two categories: private marketplaces that talent that quote unquote our clients only know about, that they're curating and managing and drawing from, and then public marketplaces of all types, ranging from large organizations, names that we know, they're out in the public mind, to very small niche organizations that only do one type of talent. But what they all have in common is that they're giving companies an avenue to go more directly to the talent, and in so doing, improve quality, lower costs, and lower time to fill, so that they can get people working to do their business faster.
Love it. Those are definitely excellent insights. Thank you, Brian. John, you do a lot of research as part of your work when it comes to working with organizations of various size and different industries. In terms of recommendations or maybe practical strategies for them to implement a marketplace strategy as such, or a freelancer community, what are some of the thoughts that you can share with us from that perspective?
It's a great question, and we have done some work around this stuff, there are 6 things that matter. So if you wanted to have a strong relationship with the extended workforce, let's call it, or the independent workforce, whatever you'd like to call it, there are 6 things that you got to do right. First thing you got to do right is have a clear perspective on how you're going to use them, when you're going to use them, to what extent you're going to use them. In some cases, organizations are just strictly on demand. We're just filling in a bit. In other cases, organizations are focused on supplementing their strategic capabilities. For example, Apple doesn't need all of the designers in the universe. It only needs a core group, and then it extends that as it needs to. I'm sure Cisco, the same sort of thing around that, from Kevin, your experience. The second thing that is really important is an effective performance management system. What that means is, as a freelancer, I want to do a good job because that's how I get the next job. That's how I make my living. So I want good feedback. I want clear expectations around the deliverables. I want solid timelines. I want to know when I've hit the milestones, and I want the chance to come back at you and say, you're setting up this work wrong, and I want to be successful So let's work on how we've been organizing this particular project. Third thing, awful lot of young project managers, particularly though not only in tech, aren't all that good working with freelancers. They want them to be employees because they want them to be subordinate. Freelancers are not subordinate. They're small business owners that are choosing to partner with you, not supplicants hoping to, etc. And so it's really important that these guys have training. Our data says that less than 45%, and then I'll go on to the next three, less than 45% of client companies actually, according to their freelancers, actually know how to work well with freelancers. So now what are the other three? Fourth is really important that you're treating them as a member of the team during the time that they're a member of the team, whatever that project is. It's so easy. Qualcomm several years ago had two different colored badges. One if you were a real employee, the other if you were contingent. You know, it's like wearing a yellow star as a Jew in the 40s in Europe. I don't want to be a second-class citizen. I want to be a member of the team. Fifth, there are some areas where you don't want the freelancer to be doing the work, where it doesn't make sense. There's a problem in terms of IP, there's a problem in terms of relationships, etc. So be smart about when and how to use a freelancer. It's not all the time, and it's not none of the time. And then finally, and very importantly, and I'll tell you a story about this, treat them with fairness, treat them with respect, and pay them on time. There's a big deal going on right now in the UK where Liz Barkley, who's this commissioner of small business, has put together, and Kevin, you'd enjoy this, put together a team to say, we got to get people to be paid on time. I'll tell you a quick story. This quick story is a long time ago, I was doing a strategic project for Dow Chemical. And then I got a note that said, oh, there's been a problem. We're having a little trouble financially, so we've decided to pay you 90 days after net receipt of invoice. I quit. They called up and they said, you can't quit. And I said, what are you talking about? I can't quit. I've become your bank of record. That's not an acceptable situation. They couldn't change that perspective. They were a wonderful example of an organization that at that point in time didn't understand that freelancers were a valuable part of a total flexible blended workforce. They saw them as folks that could be axed in a minute, that weren't quite important, that weren't quite necessary, that were kind of second class. That's not acceptable. So those 6 things, Jahn, are absolutely at the heart of creating a powerful and positive relationship between, freelancers, or as we call it, the freelance revolution, the freelance economy, and those folks and platforms and the companies that they work for. And if you do that, you're golden. And by the way, if you don't do that, you're not doing a very good job of managing your own full-time people either.
Mhm. Right, absolutely.
Wow.
I love how you categorize very complex, insights as such for important space as what you're talking about. And to take that a little bit further, Brian, want to get your thoughts on some of the success factors, I guess, or what really makes a talent marketplace platform truly successful. If you share some perspectives of what you've observed in the market.
Yeah, well, and so first, at risk maybe of piling on it, I've got to echo a couple of things that John said that were absolutely critical. And, that was, two of his points are about performance management and making folks part of the team. It drives me absolutely crazy that this population, this business critical population of workers, is treated as less than, and that's got to stop. A lot of the badge thing is a tired old meme that needs to go away. But the problem that we see is that companies are way too stuck in their ways. They don't change. That stuff about badges goes back to the 90s, and it's just dumb, and it's time to change. When this workforce is that critical, you've got to think about them as part of your team strategically and tactically. So all in with you on that, John. And I think it's just important for groups like this to get that message out, and then the folks that are listening to take that back to their companies. In terms of success factors, every time I talk about these, it's not like rocket science stuff. It's very much basic stuff, and it starts with things like strong executive sponsorship, having goals that are measurable and achievable, and that you're constantly adjusting, and importantly, that those goals are tied to larger corporate goals. It's easy to say we want cost savings, but why? What initiatives does that tie to? We're trying to get talent in the door faster or better or whatever. Why? What larger thing does that tie to? And again, that's something that can be a challenge in contingent labor programs, where people are sort of thinking in a vacuum rather than more holistically across their company. And by thinking holistically across your company and showing how the program you're running meets company goals, the program rises, you rise in your career. It's sort of win-win. So that's really important. And then you've got to have the right technology integrated with each other, using the right providers to service that technology if you're using external providers. And you don't have to by any means, but our view is whatever you're using as your VMS, your extended workforce platform, and this is something my team and I focus on, needs to be connected to all these systems in a seamless way to reduce friction that encourages usage, so that when a hiring manager is looking at talent, they're not really thinking about where did this talent come from. They're thinking about who should I choose to meet my need. And then, again, the service providers, whether it's an MSP, your payroll provider, if you have a separate curation provider, all need to be aligned to the technology, to the goals, so that they're serving that greater need.
Right, absolutely. And I want to pull the thread a little bit further on that. John, you briefly talked about the implementation side of such talent marketplace within an organization of various size. But adoption, that's another layer of complexity when it comes to overcoming the obstacles and hurdles on the path to a broad-based, full-scale talent marketplace adoption. Can you speak briefly about some of those strategies that organizations can take advantage of?
Sure. I think that, let me step back, if I may, and please forgive me. I'll try to do this as briefly as possible, but I'm not a brief speaker. All of us are using the term contingent. We all need to stop now, because this isn't contingent. This isn't extra. This isn't not regular stuff. What we're seeing is a fundamental shift, and it's a shift from old colonialist versions of organization where we own the people to a very different model of a flexible blended workforce, which brings together employees, contractors, freelancers, advisors in common cause. So who's contingent at this point? It's really important to start to imagine a very different model. I like the term of extended workforce, but it's not the freelancers that are extended, it's the workforce that's extended. And I loved Kevin's introduction, which is he was dealing at Cisco with 50,000 of these people. How can we even begin to think about contingent when we're talking about 50,000 people? It's the size of a city. So I think the first thing, John, is we just have to start with a new model, a new way of thinking about this, which is we've got challenges in terms of competition. We've got challenges in terms of speed of change. We've got challenges in terms of the need to bring people into the organization that would not ever join us on a full-time basis, and we couldn't afford them, even if they could and would. So we've got to think in a very different way about that. Once you do that, then what Brian brought up is absolutely critical, which is let's put this together with the strategy of where you're trying to get to. Because when we start to think about this stuff strategically, we end up with a very different model of workforce over the next 5 to 10 years than simply an extension of the one that we've got now. We've got the tech, we've got the ability, we've got the need to think very differently about the workforce of the future. And if we are willing to do that, we've got a powerful friend in the way of those marketplaces. And let me just make one other comment, which is the data is already there in terms of how fast companies are adopting this flexible blended workforce without saying it, without calling it, without knowing exactly how to term it, or without a very clear path from A to B. But what we know is that this has been the best year for freelancers ever. It's a multiple of the challenge. It's a multiple of the revenues last year. It's going to be a multiple of the revenues next year over this year. I think we've got to call this a win and move on to creating collectively a new model of the workforce, as opposed to trying to kind of work the old and the new and somehow make it fit. It's all new.
Yep.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Kevin, you've been part of, very large enterprise corporate environments, as well as right now you also do consulting for, smaller organizations as well. So you've seen different sides of the spectrum, and looking into your crystal ball in terms of what's in the future for these hiring marketplaces as just overall talent acquisition strategies, what are some of the insights or trends that you could share with us?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people start implementing talent clouds and marketplaces within their organization. And it goes back to Brian's point and John's point, right? So we're looking to improve speed of hiring and quality of hiring, and both that marketplace, that talent cloud, can give us a sense of a validated experience, even a certified experience in some instances. We know, where I've got to pick up John's word. I'm going to just use extended workforce. Sorry, John. I'll work on changing that afterwards, right? Where that workforce has been and what projects it's been in and what experience it really, really does have. And I think the direct sourcing side of it, that makes total sense as well, right? Because, when I was in a procurement organization, it was cost, it was speed, and it was quality. I do think, disagree a little bit with Brian, I think cost is, in certain industries, has gone away, especially in 2021, right? And it's now like, can I get somebody and are they good, right?
Yeah.
And I think that marketplace, that cloud helps. Right? Now, not all industries, right, Brian? I see you nod there, right? But not all industries, and I think cost obviously will come in as it settles down a little bit.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That makes perfect sense, Kevin. Thank you for sharing that.
So,
Cesar,
am I allowed to ask a question to break the flow a little bit? Right,
Well, you just did ask a question, so.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Cheers, appreciate it. So, Jan, Brian, I get this bit about the different color badges, and I hate that as well. Although let's also acknowledge that this extended workforce does want to be treated differently. They don't want to do all of the, I was going to say BS, but I'd be nice, the overhead that goes with working in a large corporate, right? They don't want to go to all the all hands and all the kumbaya meetings, right? But the reason you have some of those rules in place is to stop this co-employment issue, right? So how do we get on top of that so that we can treat people equally and not worry about, damaging our brand? Because I think the biggest job that I had to do at Cisco was to protect Cisco's brand, right? And, same for Beeline and what they're doing, right? They're protecting their clients' brands. How do we get around that? I'm sorry for diverting your podcast.
No, that's a very valid point. Thank you for highlighting that. Cesar, as a practitioner in the staffing space for many years, how do you think these marketplaces will change or shape the way organizations find talent these days?
A number of ways, in my opinion. I mean, first of all, to take a step back, I feel like, this marketplace is spinning up every other month, and a lot of them, and there's a lot of coming into the market. I definitely see a lot of value because talent marketplaces provide a lot of direct access to the talent, which is great. A lot of companies, they typically have like an organization, like a middleman, handle that relationship. And organizations that need to speed the hire, or they need to focus on a marketplace that has a niche type of talent and that are actually vetted or curated type of talent pool is the advantages that marketplaces are going to be able to bring, corporations that need to hire quickly.
Right, absolutely.
Can I build on what Cesar just said?
Absolutely.
I'm going to follow Kevin's breaking of the rules. And I just wanted to throw one data point out in support of what Cesar just said. Bloomberg yesterday, if anybody read Bloomberg yesterday, they said they've now counted 1,000 unicorns among startups. 1,000 unicorns, each worth over $1 billion.
Wow.
So now take all of the big corps, the enterprises that are trying desperately to stay in line with those guys and continue to beat them, as these guys don't have the legacy kinds of challenges that the big guys have. And then you take a look at global growth in areas like LATAM, in areas like Africa and Southeast Asia. Cesar, we're seeing somewhere between 800 and 1,000 platforms. I get a call or an email or a text from 3 to 5 a week. So what we're seeing now, which is so wonderful, is that this freelance revolution used to be a revolution in developed Europe to some extent, the US, but not much more. We're now seeing it as a global revolution. And the folks that are needing these resources, the flexible blended workforce, the folks that are creating the flexible blended workforce are these new organizations that as unicorns will continue to point the way for big companies now and for the future. So I am very excited about the growth demands of the market itself pulling us into a new way of working, because it doesn't make sense to not do it any other way.
Yeah. Yeah, those are definitely very compelling stats that you sharing, John. Appreciated that.
Yeah.
So some of the advantages are pretty obvious, but when we talk about the disadvantages or, of utilizing talent marketplaces as such, Kevin, can you share some of the thoughts or perspectives? What could be some of those disadvantages?
I think the disadvantages is just if there's too many of them, right? So where do you participate in as a freelancer? And I also think there's a barrier to entry for some of the smaller corporates as well. I think that, we've got to work out how can we work easier and not disrupt some of the smaller organizations. The bigger ones will get it. They've got the scale, they've got applicants feeding into the system that they can use, but not the smaller, not known brands. I think it's going to be a little bit tougher to implement.
Yeah, absolutely. Cesar, any further thoughts on some of the disadvantages you can highlight?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest ones I see just with anything new to market is just purely adoption, right? Understanding how to really work with talent marketplaces. A lot of them are new, a lot of them are learning. And on both sides, right, from the customer to the talent marketplaces. So it's just, the longer they're going to go to market, the longer they're in business, they're going to make adjustments. I think that, it is getting saturated. Obviously, John's getting 3 to 5 calls a week on talent marketplaces. It's a ton out there, and I just think they need to make adjustments on how they engage. Disadvantages. I believe some of the marketplaces are trying to be, a little bit of everything to everybody. It's hard to be a generalist in a talent marketplace, in my opinion. I think the niche players, those, surgical type marketplaces where they, I'm a Salesforce marketplace, or I just do security or whatever, be like that. That's a nice value proposition. It's easier to curate, and you still have a huge global market. So I think, if they make those adjustments, I think those players will be very successful.
Yeah, you make an exceptional point, and I want to double click on that a little bit further. When it comes to winning that war on retention these days, especially when you operate in a specialized environment, it adds another layer of complexity as you partner with various organizations, and some are more successful than the other in retaining the top talent. What are some of the observations or strategies that you provide, or maybe you observe when it comes to retaining that top niche talent?
Yeah, that's on every leader's mind right now. And I would tell you that I think that, to reiterate with everyone that's said on the panel, that I believe what I'd love to hear is that the extended workforce actually now has a seat at the table, in my opinion. Like, they're not considered that, right? And if that comes from the top, and they're going to treat people, and your retention rate should go up. Right. I think providing, solutions for them, providing the same type of benefits that full-time employees get, in a different manner without jeopardizing any type of compliance issues. The ones who are going to accept those things, or they're going to be a little bit more flexible and not be afraid of compliance, but embrace compliance and make things work for the extended workforce. They're the ones who are going to win in the war retention.
Right, absolutely. Brian, you've been part of a large technology organization, and as you partner with clients of various size, what have you observed when it comes to retaining the top talent?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, when we were prepping, we were talking about, like, is this the solution to retaining top talent and, helping avoid the great resignation or whatever we're calling it these days. And I think it's a solution. If any of us had the solution, we would probably be sitting on a beach sipping drinks, counting our money, because that's what everyone's looking for. I think that this can help not necessarily retain top talent, it help you find talent in ways that you weren't looking to find it. By going to marketplaces that are alternative sources of supply. And by the way, like, none of this is meant to diminish the importance of sort of the traditional brick and mortar suppliers. They have a huge role to play. And one of the things we're seeing actually is a convergence of technology marketplaces and traditional suppliers, and they're all starting to look more and more like each other. And I think that will continue. But from retention perspective, access to talent, I think is probably a better term. This can help because it expands your reach outside of of your immediate geographic area. We're seeing our clients, we're talking to our clients constantly about this. And, I'm based in this area, but now that I'm in my workforce is hybrid, I don't care where my contractors are from. And that's starting really within the country with no matter what country it is, but people are starting to even look globally for certain jobs, as long as the time zone thing can be worked out. And I think some of the other topics we've talking about need to be included when we're talking about retention. This idea of including contractors, making them part of the team, that's going to make them want to continue to work for you, giving them opportunity, whether it's opportunity to get more skills that advance their careers, giving them, if they're doing a good job and you like them and they like working for you, instead of just letting them go at the end of their assignment, what's their next role within your organization? There's a huge opportunity there. So many times workers work for a company once and then never come back, but they learned all the tricks of the trade about working there, and that's just a huge lost opportunity. So I think you just said, my personal philosophy, and I think it applies here, is like, you've got to combine a lot of different strategies to achieve this particular goal.
That's a great point. If you don't mind, I'd like to extend a little bit on especially retaining talent with internal market. We have this idea of how creating a strategy of an internal marketplace companies can actually stand up. So versus that individuals will be finishing assignments and having you have postings within your own organizations, and make sure that you have an opportunity to retain all that knowledge that's walking out the door and put them on different assignments. So I think that the marketplace model in general can be also used as an internal strategy.
It's nice.
Yeah.
Can I add a couple things?
Yes, sir.
I want to come back to the challenges a bit, because I think it bleeds into the retention stuff. Challenge one is we don't have enough full-time freelancers. Simple. We got 3/4 of the freelancers in the US and 2/3 of the freelancers in the EU are part-time. Part-time folks aren't very helpful as a significant enterprise presence, because you can't count on them. They have conflicts of interest, et cetera, et cetera. So we've absolutely got to build on the percentage of full-time people. If you take a look at the US, nominally 59 million people that are doing freelancing of some kind, according to Upwork, but about 45 million of those are part-time. Only about 14 or 15 million are full-time. So we got to build the full-time population. Second, got to do a better job of establishing standards. As the number of these platforms grow, as we talked about that, the problem is we've got standards all over the place. What constitutes a top 3% person? What constitutes a top 5% person? What data can we share with people around the competencies of the folks other than at a functional level? Third, freelancing is a lumpy business. Tech is doing real well right now, but if you're an independent management consultant, it's not so easy. And if you're a copywriter, you're competing with AI technology. It's tough. So we've got to keep in mind that these platforms want quantity, because at the end of the day, they want to know that they're going to meet all of your needs, and who knows how many times you're going to need an astrophysicist with blonde hair. But somehow you're going to need to be able to access that if you want to be a full platform. Next, clients need education on how to be better partners. We need to provide that. One of the things that myBasePay ought to be doing starting tomorrow is building an educational business that says, we want to teach you guys how to work well with freelancers so that you can retain them. Because, by the way, one of the reasons you can't retain them is you're not treating them very well. Next, I'm sorry to give you my list, but I'm passionate about
That's
this
great.
stuff. Next, HR only loves full-time people.
Yeah.
HR doesn't know how to build a workforce. HR only knows how to administer a workforce. I'm saying that as a guy that was one and is pretty connected and is seen as a thought leader, blah, 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 within HR. We need to build the HR skills to deal with a flexible blended workforce, because right now they only know how to deal with the old-fashioned workforce. And then finally, here's the biggest challenge. 40% of Americans and a very large percentage of Europeans and Asians, and it's growing, are freelance light. They're part-timers, they have a side gig, and that means that they're a different employee than they've ever been before, because they got options. They got confidence. They're not owned by the organization. They're not afraid any longer. So employees are asking for more flexibility, more opportunity to work at home, faster promotion, more development. And they're asking that because they got choices. And so we're seeing a fundamental shift in the way that employees think about their employment. We have not seen an equivalent shift on how executives think about the employment of those professionals. And so we're going to see an awful lot of people leaving pretty quickly over the next couple of years. The Great Resignation is not a resignation. The Great Resignation is a great awakening. And long-term, it's a great reorganization of the workforce. I think that we've got tremendous opportunity, but these are some big things that we got to work. And myBasePay, I think, is part of the solution to that.
That's
Wow,
great.
appreciate
I love
it.
you.
I
I
got
love
if
your
you don't
passion.
mind, to disrupt that, like what Kevin was saying, I got a question for John as well. So is it, like this awakening and talent supply everybody talks about, is it really talent supply issue, or is it really a talent engagement? How you engage with the type of talent?
I would say it's certainly engagement, but in addition to engagement, it's also supply. So you got to engage those guys, but the problem is when 3/4 of the folks are part-time, it's tough to get escape velocity with the enterprise space.
Absolutely.
Because I need 300 of these guys, and I need to know that they're going to be fully there for the next 3 months, because we've got an important app that we're putting out. Well, I can't really do that because I can do that in the evening, I can do that on the weekends. Sorry, man. So we've got both challenges, the engagement for sure, Cesar, but also we just need more bodies that are full-time and competent to be working in these areas.
Great point.
By the way, what that leads to is a new way for platforms to start thinking about stuff like providing a guaranteed minimum income.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing those insights.
It's really good.
So far, we've looked at everything from the lens of the hiring organization, but looking at on the flip side, from the worker experience, Kevin, from perspective of the barriers or maybe the best practices and other important considerations independent workers need to keep in mind when leveraging the talent marketplaces as such to find and secure work, share some thoughts with us from that perspective.
I think from the independent contractor point of view is really being very accurate and succinct with your profile and keep it up to date. I think, sharing availability and what they're working on, I think is key. And I think, trying to come up with what is their specialism and what is the value that they can bring to a corporation. I think it's, you look at so many LinkedIn profiles and it's like, I can do all of this, right? But really when we're looking at that contingent workforce space, what is your specialism and where do you want to play and what excites you, right? So you put me on a project that has lots of Excel spreadsheets I have to maintain and stuff like that. I'm not going to do very well. It's just not me, right? And I know that. But, if I can get very honest in that platform to say, this is what I do, this is all I do, and I'm good at it, that works.
Right, absolutely. I love that perspective. John, you did a survey which I guess revealed that 45% of freelancers think that their clients really, know how to work with them, essentially. And to take that a little bit further in terms of that, really the secret sauce, so some of these companies that are successful in building their relationships with the freelancers, what does that really mean? What can you share with us from that survey perspective?
The survey said a whole bunch of really interesting things, and that was certainly part of it, John. That was certainly part of it, the 45%. When you take a look at what happens inside that, let me suggest a couple of things. One is we created an index of 10 items that invited people to rate their clients. It's a pretty cool it's a pretty cool index. And Jahn, one of the things that you want, and then I'll come back around to the answers, one of the things that you want if you're a freelancer working for a platform is you want the platform to represent your interests, not just trying to make it work with the company. And so what we're seeing more and more is the platforms are becoming more interventionist, more active in sitting down with the client and saying, you know, I can't get anybody to work with you. I can't get these guys to stay. I'm hearing a lot of complaints. Can we sit down and help you to figure out what's going on wrong? Because we sure want to work with you, but at the same time, what we're finding is you don't know how to work with freelancers. So let's figure that one out. So part of that's the education, part of that's the consulting that should be going on. Jahn, the other thing that we're learning is that industries vary and regions vary. Example, if you're a tech worker in the US, there's a pretty good chance that your clients know how to work with you. If you're a marketing person in LATAM, it's a pretty good chance that they don't. There's a pretty good chance that they're telling you you're too expensive. There's a pretty good chance that they see you as a pair of hands rather than inviting you to give all of your creativity to it. There's a pretty good chance that they're not going to give you access to some of the information that you need to get the job done, and that they're going to expect more from you than they ought to expect in terms of time frame. When you take a look at independent management consultants in Africa, you see some of the same stuff. It's an immature market for freelancers. They know how to work with McKinsey, they know how to work with BCG, but they don't know how to work with the freelancers. And what they don't understand is that a third of the folks that they're working with when they're working with McKinsey or BCG are freelancers that happen to be sent to McKinsey or BCG, former alumni that are now doing this stuff. So part of the challenge here is you've got to drill down a little bit. You got to understand the area of freelancing that you're talking about. You got to understand the market that you're dealing with and the region that you're operating in. And the data from the survey becomes really interesting in terms of some of the challenges that the freelance marketplace writ global needs to address. Does that make sense? Is that kind of what you were thinking about?
It makes perfect sense. It definitely makes perfect sense from that perspective. And to take that a little bit further from a perspective of the future of work, Brian, sharing some strategies in terms of being able to adapt and successfully transition into a remote work model. What are your thoughts there? What are some of the things to consider when it comes to leveraging such model?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see just a constant change over the next few years in the workforce. I think, we're still figuring out exactly what the right balance of remote and in-person work is. And, that's going to be a different answer for different companies in different industries and depending on, their own culture and things like that. I mean, I was, when we were waiting for the attendees to join in, we were talking about the fact that Beeline just had its first in-person sales kickoff in 2 years. And I was with people that I hadn't been with in a couple of years. And it just reminded me of, there are a lot of human interactions that are better in person. And it's a very obvious and easy thing to say, but I think some companies have gotten so excited about this idea of remote work, and people have gotten excited about remote work that they're forgetting those things. And so there's going to need to be a working out of that balance. I think you're going to continue to see, though, along those lines, this idea of companies hiring from places where they don't have buildings, and hybrid will continue. I think companies will continue to expand their use of alternative sources of talent, all designed to get them directly to the talent so that they can be more engaged, so they can reuse those workers. I think you'll continue to see a blending of permanent and extended workers. Individuals will take a so-called permanent job that they only work at for 2 years. And then they'll do a gig, right? That's 6 months and they'll switch back and forth. And I think that, we will gradually continue to move towards these ideas of first total talent acquisition, companies saying, okay, I have a need. and what's the best way to fill that need, but looking at all the sources of talent, all the ways to fill that. And that's a big area of focus for us, is that kind of technology enabled advisory. And then once total talent acquisition, we make progress there, you'll see a move towards total talent management. I don't think that total talent management happens all that often. There aren't a whole lot of good examples of it. But ultimately companies need to think about their entire workforces at every part of it: acquisition, management, performance, succession, but I don't think we're there yet, but moving in that direction.
Absolutely. Well,
just building on something that Brian said, right? He said, we're hiring people where we don't have buildings anymore. I think that's also going to help us when we're looking for talent as well. We can look to hire in places where there's concentration of great people. And I look at my experience of hiring people from Michigan State. They produce, and I'm not from Michigan State, right? They produce fantastic supply chain and procurement people, and I've worked with many of them. And so why not get a strategy if I'm looking for that? How do I connect to that school? How do I get people leaving that school coming to work for me in that way, right? So I think that the remote work is here to stay. I think there is a balance. I miss meeting people as well, right? But it also can help us find quality individuals.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Kevin. And time flies when you're having fun. So I'm going to switch to audience questions that I'm receiving quite a few of them. There's Cesar, I'm going to let you take this first question. Is around, and I'll paraphrase and summarize, is ways and strategies to improve the interview process. What do you see some organizations do better job at interviewing, and what are some of the recommendations that you can provide?
Oh, wow. I mean, I'll be as brief as I can, but definitely, this definitely just, I feel like organizations need to either re-engineer just the interview process in general. It's just still, in my opinion, some companies have made a lot of strides where they're, consolidating interviews and making a lot of decisions faster. But, I think it comes down to, having a precise, understand what a successful interview is, break it down to make it as short as possible, and get the players within the organization, in my opinion, that are successful at screening and interviewing, because not everybody that is looking for this resource may not be a good interviewer, right? So I think identifying that, creating a shorter interview cycle, and especially from a feedback perspective, it has to be really important, because that's you're not just interviewing candidates, they're interviewing you as well. People have a ton of options today, and if you're not going to get back to them, you're just going to, there's other companies that are going to take them. And the last thing we want to do is lose good talent based on an interview process. That's the last thing we want to do. I mean, I would definitely say, it's a combination of all of it, but in general, we need to shorten the cycle and get feedback appropriately.
100%. Very valid points. Thank you for that. There's another question, and Kevin, I'm going to let you take a stab at this. Thoughts on how organizations can really streamline things like contracts, confidentiality agreements, and other related, documentation as part of this when bringing on external talent in highly regulated industries and environments. Other companies who can, look into that do better job than the other.
I think the future is looking good in that space. I do think we're going to have a whole series of pre-validated, experience and background checks and things like that. I think it's going to get taken care of us. I mean, I was educated from a university in the UK, and it just takes ages to validate that here in the United States, right? But it's been validated 4 or 5 times now. Do it once, right? So I think technology is going to help us, and let's make the contract simple, right? I love John's point, right? Pay people on time and don't treat them as a bank of a multi-billion-dollar companies, right? But simplicity, the onboarding, and I think the background check process will help us as well. And just one point to Cesar's point on interviewing, you have to make it a priority. You can't say I'll interview someone in a week's time; they're gone. Right. When can you squeeze them in tomorrow? Right? It has to be that important to get talent.
Yeah, that's great.
I add one other piece to this, and that is, all of our interviews are one way. We want to know whether this fits us. I would love to know that we're asking the freelancers that we want to work with, what would make this a positive experience for you? And there are all sorts of answers to that. It may be, I'd like to teach your guys what I know. I'd like to be part of your team meetings. I'd like to be part of the development course that you're teaching on Laravel. I'd like, whatever it is. This is a two-way street. This is a partnership, and we keep thinking that it's one way. Let's find the mutuality of this relationship. That's the best way to retain folks. If you're giving them what they want as well as getting what you need, that's a win.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Brian, I'm going to take you this last question, and I'll try to paraphrase and summarize. It's around, and John made a perfect segue when it comes to positive experience for the worker, is around virtual onboarding. How can organizations succeed in that space? Because onboarding workers is complex to begin with, and when you do that virtually, adds another layer of complexity. Share some thoughts with us from that perspective.
Yeah, and this is near and dear to my heart because I've been onboarding people into my industry and in my team lately, and I've been reminded of how difficult it is to explain, especially when people come from outside the industry, this crazy kind of world we all live in. I mean, one, it's just, it's having the right tools and techniques and templates set up so that you're teed up for success. I think from a technology perspective, it's about having automation help ensure that those things happen so that humans can concentrate on the things humans do best, right? Like that's our view of automation, AI, technology, human interaction is let technology do what it can so that humans don't have to. And so, we concentrate on things like integrations there so that, when the person starts, they have the email ID that they need to access the systems. If they're going on site, they've got a badge, they've got the equipment. And so then humans can concentrate on getting the person up to speed so they work. And so that's the critical thing from my perspective.
Great. Thank you, Brian. And we're right on time. And this was a very insightful conversation. I personally learned quite a bit. I can guarantee you there's going to be a round two. To all our panelists, I appreciate you guys making the time for this. You were very generous with the information you guys shared with us today. And to our audience as well, being so engaging with and asking a lot of thought-provoking questions. So thank you so much for your time today, guys, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your time.
Thank you all. It was great.
Appreciate it.